2025 is coming to a close, and you know what that means.
It's time to get blackout on eggnog.
No, Kayla, that comes after you do some reflecting. Reflecting has to come first, and that could feel a little overwhelming.
It's true. That's 52 weeks you got to revisit. Lucky for you, we have a 4-step framework that is going to allow you to reflect with ease.
And it's going to help you plan for the next year. Very important. Let's get into it.
We'll get into reflection in just a bit, but first, Kyle, I have a very important question. With the holiday season rapidly approaching, what are you doing to celebrate?
Well, I'm so excited, Kayla. I'm taking my daughter to Minnesota. She's going to experience a real hearty winter for the first time.
Yeah, I can't lie, that sounds cold. So are you taking extra time off, or are you just working from your parents' home?
Working from my childhood home during holidays with an infant couldn't be me. Good luck getting anything done. So no, I'm not doing that. Instead, I'm planning to work from an industrious co-working space while I'm out of town. The tough part will be choosing between their downtown or North Loop, Minneapolis locations.
Well, you're not alone there. Industrious is the perfect option for co-working during those end-of-year, out-of-town visits you may have planned. And since Industrious is like the Rolls-Royce of co-working, it's almost like a little escape during the chaos if you need just a little separation from your family during the holidays.
Between the stock fridges, you know I need my midday yogurt, breakfast options, including Bagel Mondays, and on-site experience managers to make sure your stay is enjoyable. What's not to love? Plus, with over 250 locations, you can always find a workspace that works for you.
Try out Industrious for yourself with a day pass or a meeting room booking, now 50% off for Per My Last Email listeners. Visit industriousoffice.com/PMLE to get your discount or free tour. That's industriousoffice.com/PMLE for 50% off your first day pass or meeting room booking. So, Kyle, how was your 2025?
Ooh, hitting me with a big question right away. The off the top vibe check, it was a great year, but it was more of a great year personally, because I think that overshadowed my professional year. Like, my daughter was born in February, so that was amazing. And then I had 3 months of pat leave, which was also pretty fun. So it felt like a over index on the personal stuff, which made like thinking about my professional achievements like harder, because I think my initial memories were all about rooted in kind of personal.
I think, can I just interrupt you for a second? I think it would be bad if it wasn't that case. If you're like, yeah, my daughter was born in Feb and I didn't really care.
I was looking back at my calendar, totally forgot my daughter was born.
Right. Well, that's like, that's also fair. You're like, wow, it was in February. That's crazy. But if you're like, what, but my professional stuff way more important, I'd be like, let's
But multimedia monetization, that's my real daughter, am I right?
Let's think about that.
Yeah, so big personal year. I think professional, it was a great year. I think kind of building confidence in this role now is my second year in the chief of staff role. And, you know, we have unique roles here where it definitely feels like jack of all trades, which is, I think, fun because there's a lot of exposure to different things, but also can be intimidating where you kind of have to like figure out your lane. You're constantly reevaluating what projects you're working on and where you fit in. So that's like the blessing and the curse of the role. And I think I got a little better at handling that too. So overall, personally, like one of the best years of my life. Professionally, kind of a solid year.
Okay, good.
What about you?
Yeah, I'd say my vibe check is like, it was fine. And so this is interesting though, because when we're going over the framework, spoiler alert, step 1 is vibe check.
Yes.
I think if you had asked me this like before I went through the whole framework, I would have been slightly more negative.
Okay.
I think I would have been like, I feel like I was spinning my wheels for most of the year. It's very similar, right? We don't necessarily have these like full teams where we're all working towards a goal. I have 4 different pillars that are, each one is very, very different from the other. Their goals are different. How I approach each of those pillars. For example, the online games for morningbrew.com, very different than our consumer event strategy. And the way that I focus on each of those things is very, very different. And so it can feel like maybe I didn't get a lot of progress in any of them. And I felt like I was spending a lot of time doing like little stuff that didn't matter. And now, spoiler alert again, that changed when I started looking at the rest of the framework. And I felt a little bit more confident in how it went. So I would say similarly, it's like, this is technically my second year in this role as well. I feel like I had a lot more confidence in the pillars and confidence in the strategy for each of them. And I think that like, it was good. It was fine.
Yeah. Well, so you bring up a good point. One, I want to say, yes, step 1 of the framework is vibe check, which means before you actually go and reflect by looking at your calendar, pulling up old documents, whatever you're going to do, it's really important to like just write down how you feel without doing kind of any research. How does it feel?
Yeah.
And you bring up a good point. It's really interesting to compare that to then what you actually discover for, I think, two reasons. One, you brought up, we have a negativity bias as humans. So you tend to think the year went a little worse than it did.
Yeah.
Or like you forget some really big projects that were actually like really important that you worked really hard on because you're on to the next thing and you're like, oh, but I'm stuck on this problem. The second thing is peak end theory.
Okay.
Which is when you evaluate something, you think of the peak, so like the highest high, and how it ended. So like if you're not, and in the end of the year tends to be pretty stressful.
Yeah.
So you over-index on the feeling of stress and you apply that feeling throughout the entire year. It ends up being like a little more effective, a little more even-keeled, a little more, I think, good than you would have on the vibe check. So it's important to do that just to kind of see how you're feeling and then compare it to when you actually do the framework.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense, especially like for me, Q4 is crazy town.
Yeah.
This is like basically from like middle of November to middle of December is like the craziest 4 weeks of the year.
Yeah.
And a lot of the things that I've been working towards all year happen in that month. And so like every challenge, every win, it feels very amplified. So when I was going through and thinking about it, I was thinking about that month.
Yeah.
And so it's like, wow, the things are crazy. But it's like, no, they weren't crazy all year. You know?
And when you think of peak end theory, like oftentimes like your biggest, most like proud accomplishment isn't like in January, February. So oftentimes it's those months that you forget. And that actually is what happened to me when I went through the rest of it. The one last thing I want to say before we get to step 2 of the framework is something called the fresh start effect. So if you're listening to this and you're like, I'm going to hit pause or I'm going to go to my next podcast because I think you can set goals whenever you want. Don't do that because you're wrong.
Wrong.
Incorrect, wrong. There is something called the fresh start effect, which is you actually do set and accomplish goals at a higher percentage when you build them around a temporal landmark, like a new year, like a Monday. And you can set these temporal landmarks kind of arbitrarily, but obviously a new year is a great one to anchor these goals to. And there is some science behind that. Look up the fresh start effect. Katie Milkman, How to Change is her book. It's a fantastic book. So you're wrong, and now you need to listen to the rest of this.
Yeah, now you're stuck here listening to this.
Okay, so framework. Step 1, vibe check.
And so my recommendation for this, which is what I did, is set like a short amount of time on the timer, like whether it's 5 minutes, 12 minutes, 15 minutes, whatever, and just like write out what you think, how you think your year went.
Yeah.
And so this like, it could be very like, you know, William Faulkner. Don't be like committed to grammar.
Okay.
There's no paragraph
AP,
structure.
AP lit over there.
But just like
William Faulkner?
I don't know. I was just thinking The Sound and the Fury was like the hardest book I ever read. And like you can just press enter when like it compels you.
Yeah.
You know, you don't need to worry about like making this look good. Nobody else is going to see this. It's just for you to get your thoughts on paper.
Yep.
And then once you do that, read it over and then like table it. Just be like, okay, this is what I think.
Kinda like a brain
it's
dump.
a vibe. Brain dump that shit out.
Yeah.
And then now start blank slate for number 2, which is evidence gathering.
Yes. Get your receipts.
Yep.
So how did you go about getting your receipts? What does that mean and how did you approach that?
Yeah. So there's a few things that I did. First, there's, you know, when you're looking at all of the things that you do, where do you put those things down? First, your calendar. So the first thing I did is I went to Jan 1 on my calendar and week by week, I just pressed next.
Isn't that a crazy experience?
It's crazy.
Yeah,
I'm like, oh my gosh, I didn't even remember doing this.
Literally.
Like, that's insane. And I have my like professional and personal all in one calendar.
Yes, me too.
And I was like, damn, like that week in January, I went to a lot of restaurants. Like,
I know.
That's super cool.
I was like, oh, I got dinner with Joe. Yeah. Oh, it was a great dinner.
Forgot about Joe. I wish I'd reach out to him. So I did that, and that just kind of like gave me a bit of a refresh and a reminder of what I should be focusing on.
And so when you're going through your calendar, like you go back to January, you're looking at like the meetings you had, and then if you see a big meeting, are you like writing that down somewhere of like, oh yeah, I did that?
Yeah, and what I did was I made a list. It was like super technical, but I was just like, Jan, Feb, whatever, all the way down. And then I started creating notes in each of those little pockets of my Google Doc.
Crazy technical.
I was out.
Basically a quant over here. She made a list.
I meant to say tactical, and I was like, I'm too deep into the sentence to change the word. But yeah, so then I had a running Google Doc, basically. Vibe check was page 1, and then I was like actual data collection. And so, for example, there was like a 3-hour-long meeting and block in my calendar that was like games strategy. And I was like, oh yeah, that's right. January,
that's right.
I was working with the product managers on game strategy. So that's my first one. Before I go into the other two, does that align with what you did?
I did literally the same thing. I was a bit of a quant myself. I did the same list, January down, and then I would go through each month, and I literally had the same reflections as you. Like, and again, going back to the peak end theory, like my January, we started this like multimedia monetization project, which was like a massive project. I talked to like 20, 30 people across the company. I literally thought we did that in 2024. I literally, like, that is how removed I was from the January, February, March stuff, that I was like, oh shit, that was like a massive project that like went really well. So it was amazing to reflect and write that down. So yeah, I did calendar the exact same way as you.
So second, what I did was I looked at my meeting notes.
Ooh, okay.
So there's 2 different meetings notes that I went into. First is my annual template. So I have a template where I have bi-weekly, that's every other week. I guess it could be either. Every other week meetings with my boss, Devin. And so I use the same template every single time. It's in a running doc. So I scrolled down to the bottom and then scrolled back up. And so then I was like, okay, I already know this was what was happening in January. Let me look at how I was framing it to Devin. Because it's like I have a section for wins, I have a section for priorities, and I have a section for blockers. Let me like look through and actually revisit how that looked. And then I did that for every month, again, continuing to write my like general notes. And I have to say I used AI for this.
Oh, booyah. I was just going to say, well, 2 comments. Having some sort of one-on-one document with your manager, super important. Having a wins section or like what you're working on, super important. To 1, guide the conversations, but 2, when you're having to reflect, you can go back to that document and you will like, oh, wow, I was working on that project. So when it comes time to reflect, and then when it comes time to do performance review,
which
or
is
try to articulate why you should be promoted, why you should get a raise, that document becomes this holy grail of information. The second thing I was going to say is you can download it as a PDF, and you could, I think, go through it yourself, still think about it, but then you could put it into ChatGPT and say, here is all of my notes with my boss for the past year. Comb through it and find common themes, common big projects that were referenced, and, you know, articulate those to me. It's a great way just to synthesize a long list of tasks.
Yeah. So what I did was I copy and pasted it in, and I got to like March and I was like, this is taking me kind of a long time. Like, let's see what ChatGPT has to say about this. And I just said by month, summarize my biggest wins, challenges, and blockers, or whatever it was. And it did that pretty well. I was able to be like, oh, okay, like I mentioned this thing, but it was like, it was a reference to something.
It doesn't know the context.
You know, it doesn't know the context. But I was able to make that process. The first 3 months probably took me, 20 minutes. And the last 9 probably took me 20 minutes. So that is another way to like get through it quickly.
I did also my meeting notes, but I used Granola. Shout out to Granola. They sponsored us.
Not currently, but
but they could
do it again if you want.
Come back. Love them. AI note taker. So I prompted Granola. It has all my notes to like basically gave it a prompt like, I'm reflecting on my year of 2025, comb through all of my notes year to date and output these specific things like common themes, where you saw my strengths, where you saw weaknesses. And it spits out like pretty like great stuff. Again, and it cites specific notes where you're finding it so you can go back and fact check. So that also helped paint a picture of my 2025, layer that with the calendar, and you start to get a much more holistic view of the year that you just could not think of yourself.
Yeah, so I didn't do that one specifically with the meeting notes, but I'm curious, like, did you feel like that added extra color that you wouldn't have thought of otherwise?
It did, and really where it added extra color was maybe not specific projects, but as we get down into the framework about pattern recognition, it was really good at pattern recognition of identifying where it felt like I was really strong. And then also like patterns that were like weaknesses of like lack of delegation and stuff like that. So we can get into that, but I did find it to be very effective.
That's really interesting. I might go out after this and do that.
There we go.
And the last thing I did was since my job is very project focused, I have hundreds of Slack channels.
Seriously.
So many Slack channels that are of projects that I've been on.
That's a good idea. I didn't even think about Slack. Damn.
So I went through and I looked at, because I am pretty bad at archiving stuff. So I went through and I looked at all of my like Slack channels that are like.
It became a strength for this exercise.
Like hashtag March Games promo. And I'm like, oh, okay, let's take a look at that. And like looked through and like just scrolled really quick.
Yeah.
And that helped me remember, okay, this is that actual details here of what I did. And then I put those details into the March section.
Smart.
And so that, of course, is a little different when you have like a single Slack channel that you've been talking in for 12 months. Scrolling is going to be hard. You can use the search function in Slack, but you have to like know what you're looking for. So that's like not as great.
Yeah.
But I found for the specific project-based Slack channels, that was very helpful in adding additional context that I might have forgotten.
That's really smart. I did not do that, and I wish I did.
And we'll be right back after this. Okay, back to the show.
So we have first step, vibe check. Ding! Completed. We have gather your receipts, gather some information. You can use your calendar. You can use your notes for meetings. You can use Slack. You're really just making sure you've painted an accurate picture of your year, because if you don't do that, you're going to be incorrect. Before we get to step 3, what were some of like the big project takeaways that you came away with this year when you did all of this receipt gathering?
Yeah, I think the big things, like the big obvious projects that I've been working on for the 4 pillars, I knew about already. And I think what this helped me do was remind me of how much like how many small details went into each of those projects. So like launching the new Games Hub, obviously I remember I did that because that was a peak. That was a big deal.
Yeah.
But it's like how many people went into that, how much like wrangling was involved, how much like detail-oriented discussions we had to have in order to get the design perfect and everything running. Like I forgot about all of that. And I forgot about how long it actually took.
Yeah. I think that's common. Like once it's done, you're like, oh, that was easy. And then you go back and you're like, no, it won't. Like,
yeah, you're like, oh, I'm glad that's
work.
Done. Now I can move on.
Yeah.
And again, this is very specific for like multiple projects in a year. I think in a situation like a few years ago where it was a lot less like individual project based and a lot more like annual goals.
Yeah.
I think I would have had some different outtakes, I guess, or outputs. Like I think I would have been more surprised by the wins that I had because you're so focused on that end goal.
Yeah.
So that would have been a little different. And if you are having that kind of year, I think you'll probably have a better like difference or a more shocking difference between how you thought things went and the receipts.
Yeah.
What about you? My question that I wrote down for you was, do you have one win or one miss that actually looked different after you looked at the receipts versus what your vibe check was?
Yeah, my big win that I didn't even remember doing this year was this multimedia monetization project. And again, like all this stuff is done with a committee of a lot of people. I'm not trying to take sole credit of any of this, but I totally forgot about that project. So like if I didn't reflect and I go into like promotion conversation or a raise conversation or end of year, like I would have missed that. And that's like a massive miss. So it's really important to do this stuff. Also, it's just like reminds you of the great work you did. It's a bit of a confidence boost. So that one was a big win that I totally would have missed. A big L that I realized I had is that
it's not necessarily that you realized or like something you had a thought and then you were like, oh, this was actually different than I initially remembered it. You don't have to like, I have one I can.
Yeah, share yours.
So the win, I already told you, I forgot just how much work went into specific big events that I remembered.
Yeah.
And for the miss, it's actually slightly different. I'm like, let's turn that L into a W. But I was really beating myself up about the fact that I started the crossword book. So we developed these actual books, these crossword books, based on crosswords that we've created for Morning Brew throughout the years. And I was like, we really started too late. We started way too late. It felt like we were cramming things in. And we started in June for an end of year project.
Yeah.
It's like we actually started really early.
Started like halfway through the year. Makes
like
sense.
as early as we possibly could have. So that was a miss that I was like I had in the back of my head for a few months. And I was like, no, we actually started it perfectly on time.
Yeah. It's a nice way to just reframe and actually ground your thoughts in truth, because as we know, like your vibe check often ends up being incorrect.
Well, and vibe check is inherently emotional and receipts are inherently like removed from that emotion.
Yeah.
And so it's nice to like have that vibe check so you know where you're coming from, but then also be like, but what are the facts here?
Yeah, totally. Should we move to step 3?
Let's do it.
That step is pattern recognition.
A favorite of mine.
I'm a little bit of a Sherlock Holmes guy myself, finding patterns everywhere.
I love a magnifying glass.
That's right. We love magnifying glasses. That should be some merch. Let's write that down.
Perfect.
Okay, Kayla, in your own words, what is the value of doing this pattern recognition? And then walk us through some of your patterns.
So I think this is the reflection part, right? Like we did our vibe check, we did our receipt collection, our evidence collection, and now we're looking at like, what does this all mean? We know how we thought the year went. We know how the year actually went, but like, why does this matter? Like, yeah, we did a ton of shit last year or this year. Like, so?
Yeah.
And so there's 3 things that I think I would identify, or I would use this pattern recognition in order to figure out. First is leverage points. So this is like 2 to 3 skills that you have that moved the needle in these big wins.
Kind of your superpowers.
It's your
spiky
superpowers.
traits, if you will.
So for example, I think one of my leverage points or skills that I was able to use is, this isn't like the right term, so apologies, but like I can like code switch between a bunch of different ways of thinking based on the pillar that I'm working on.
Yeah.
So if I need to be like super revenue focused, I can. And then an hour later, I can be much more like, how do we make
Creative.
everyone have a fun experience at this live event?
Yeah.
So I think that ability to kind of hold multiple ways of evaluating a project in my head at the same time, I think was very positive for me. Second, although let me hear what you think about leverage points before I go into the second.
Okay, yeah. I love leverage points. Or just thinking about like, this is how you're identifying skills that you have that are like, can move the needle in really impactful ways. I think for mine, it's maybe similar to yours in some ways. I think I'm a great synthesizer. Like the projects that went really well for me, again, which is why you go gather the receipts, were projects in which I talked to a lot of different people that have a lot of different roles that all touch a really complex thing in a lot of different ways. And then I can find like the common obstacles or the common themes that I'm hearing, synthesize that and be like, okay, I understand what we need to do to move this forward, and then present that in a way to stakeholders that can actually move them to do something about it. And so I think I've always been great at synthesizing. And this also gets into then job crafting, where it's like, okay, once you've identified what you're really great at, if you can, work code switch, I can synthesize, think about ways in which in 2026, you can set yourself up to use those strengths way more frequently. And then you're just going to become more successful. So I think it's really important to identify these leverage points.
Yeah, I agree. The second thing, and I also agree that you're really good at those things. So that's cool. The second thing is bottlenecks. So what consistent blockers did you face that prevented you from achieving your goals or that created some misses for you? For me, I think I constantly needed to build buy-in because my job is basically asking people to do things that are not in their job description.
Yes. Famously a very fun job.
Very fun. I'm like, hey, I know you're super busy, but can you give me 5 hours this week to do something?
Can you make a crossword?
Yeah, like, can you do something crazy right now so that I can make a book? So that is something that is really challenging because I feel like it weighs on you or grates at you to like be constantly asking other people to do things and constantly be like, so sorry. I know you're not supposed to be doing this, but can you please do this? And so that is something that I felt was a mental blocker for me personally. And then, of course, the blocker of like, they could say no, or they could not do it or whatever.
Yeah.
That was a big bottleneck for me. But I think what's useful about knowing this is like, okay, now that I can identify that this was a consistent blocker this year, like what can I do next year to bottleneck
That's right.
those things.
It goes back to this like job crafting idea, which is like, how do you kind of design your environment, design your job where you can lean more into your leverage points and like remove some of the bottlenecks you've experienced this year. So I think that's spot on. I would say a bottleneck I saw this year was that it's kind of the downside of, I think, a strength of mine, which is like speed. Like as you know, I hate unresolved conflict. So like if there's something that like I don't like or like needs to be fixed, I'm like, just do it right now.
Yeah.
Like go do it. And that is a great strength in some ways, but also I saw that like the best projects I worked on, I was way more thoughtful up front in like scoping them out, understanding who the stakeholders are, doing some like product manager type thinking before attacking it with a lot of speed. And so some bottlenecks were like, okay, we get halfway through it and I should have brought in this team a little earlier, or like, I should have like thought about that a little more in detail first. So it's that balancing act that I'll definitely take into 2026.
I like that. It's kind of funny that the bottleneck is that you want to go too fast.
Yeah, I'm a little
Slowing
speed
you
demon.
down. Yeah, and I think that's of course that makes a lot of sense
Yeah.
for you.
What was number 3?
So number 3 was energy boost and drains.
Ooh, come on now.
So we've done this in the past with Morning Brew Learning, where it's like figuring out what do we call it, an energy map or something like that? An
Energy audit.
Audit. Thank you so much.
Yep.
Where you basically like spend 5 days like taking a look at everything that you are doing and like ranking it, like, am I energized by this or does this drain my energy? And I think this pattern identification in a broader way, instead of looking at the hour by hour, what drains me, what gives me energy, is like, which big projects drained me, which big projects gave me energy. And I think that that's something that like we don't really think about a lot. And especially when you're talking about job crafting and next year, like, I think it's slightly different than your leverage points. It's slightly different than what you're good at. It's like what excites you. And I think that's something that's like generally good to know when you're looking at how your year went and how your year's going to go.
Yeah, and on the flip side of that, I think the energy audit is a really brilliant idea. And what I have experienced is there's like a few things that you do in your job that tend to drain you in like outsized proportion. So on the flip side, like it feels like just this small task that like shouldn't be that bad, but like haunts you.
Yeah.
You go to bed thinking about it. And
Yeah,
you're like, I don't want to do that. And like you delay it and then it's late and it like sucks all the energy out of you. And I think we all have a few things like that. And even if you can't fully delegate it away, which would be like the ideal thing, I think thinking about those things and coming up with like a really concrete plan of like how to get around that, whether it is like putting a time block on your calendar where you're like, I'm going to do this at this time every week, no exceptions. Whether it's like, if it's something that you have to do, maybe you do like a week or 2 weeks or a month or a 3 month, like plan it ahead and like book it. If it's like booking a speaker for a certain event or something like that, you just like pre-book it and then you can like relax for a little bit. That I found has been a key and something I really like feel like I slipped up on. For one certain thing I'm thinking about this year where it's just like a little bit of an energy drainer and I could have got out ahead of it. So I love this idea of a energy audit.
What was it?
I'm not going to say.
Okay.
I'm not going to say.
That's fine.
But in 2026, it's going to be a lot better.
Okay, great. That's fun. Okay, so did you have any other patterns that you identified or like any recommendations for pattern identification that we missed?
Pattern recognition. We talked about these well-scoped projects. We talked about synthesization. I think like the one other thing was like lack of delegation. Like I like to like own a lot of things and maybe it's like a trust issue or something. Shout out to like Sigmund Freud or something. But
Sure.
that I think I can improve my delegation a little more effectively or find a way to delegate that feels good to me as well. So something I should work on in 2026.
Fun.
Yeah.
Exciting. Should we go to step 4?
Step 4.
So why don't you talk about step 4 a little bit, which is comparing your achievements to your beginning of your goals.
Yes. So we have done the vibe check. I just want to remind people of the framework. Boom. We did the receipt gathering. Boom. We did pattern recognition. Boom. Now you're applying this stuff back to the goals you set at the beginning of the year. So, Kayla, I have in my hand your 2025 goals that you have not seen.
Yes, and I have in my hand yours.
That's right. You have in your hand the golden ticket to Willy Wonka's Chocolate Factory. No, we have each other's 2025 goals. This is from an episode we did at the beginning of last year or this year called How to Get Promoted.
Yep.
So I'm going to read your goals and you tell me if you hit them based on
Oh gosh, and we have not seen these. We have not listened to this in over a year.
This is live.
Yeah.
Are you ready?
Yes.
Okay, so you said in 2025 you want to rethink what your role looks like. You said, I've done what some might call an overreaction in my career progression here at Morning Brew because our department got shut down because maybe it wasn't tied to revenue enough or you felt like you were doing words written, courses developed, decks created. They weren't tied specifically to like a number that was revenue.
Yeah.
So maybe it didn't give you a lot of confidence in like job security. So you said you reacted by being intimately tied to revenue.
Yeah.
And you wanted to maybe make your job more fuzzy, which is against the advice we normally give on this show because you went like maybe too far in one direction. Do you think you got a little more fuzzy this year?
I think I got a
based
little
on
more
this
fuzzy.
reflection.
Yeah,
Okay.
I
Hell
do.
yeah.
But I will say, I think I approached it incorrectly. I think what I wanted to do was release myself from the shackles of revenue, which I did, but I don't think I appropriately planned the fuzzier parts to feel like I was still accomplishing things.
Right. You got more fuzzy tasks, but even inside that bucket, you should have like quantified them a little more.
Exactly. Yeah. And so I think that when I said I wanted fuzzier, I think I kind of over-indexed on that a little bit, because now when I was reviewing my 4 core things, I'm still being in part, because I'd say 2 of the 4 pillars are tied to revenue and 2 of the 4 are not. So I still have revenue goals.
Yeah.
But I'm spending a lot of time working on non-revenue driving things.
Yeah.
But because I didn't identify specific measurable metrics that would identify success.
Smart goals, if you will.
Smart goals. I feel like every minute I spend on the non-revenue things are like technically not going towards my goals.
Definitely. Mm-hmm.
And so I think this upcoming year, I will not do that again. I still like the fuzzier roles, sometimes more than the unfuzzy roles parts. But I think this upcoming year, I'm going to have to like really understand exactly what metrics I need to hit in those fuzzier areas to feel like I'm successful.
That's a really good reflection. I feel like this framework works.
It does work.
Shit.
Who knew? Wow.
Yeah, it's like, go back to what you were just saying. You swung maybe one direction, like be tied to revenue.
Yeah.
Then you reacted to that. You swung like, I need to get more fuzzy. And now it's like, you're swinging back to the middle, and it's like slowing the rate at which the pendulum is swinging.
Exactly.
Is a good like kind of goal for 2026.
Yeah, and I think I was like so attached to this like fuzzier element. I'm like, oh God, being attached to revenue, it's like great, but then like, there's some downsides there too. That I was like, whatever. Yeah. I'm just gonna work on live events and it's gonna be so fun, and it is so fun. It's just like, what does success look like in the live event strategy,
Great reflection.
Thank you. Okay.
Oh, I have no idea what's on this paper. I think
it's pretty funny. I think I'm going to start with the second one, and then once you reflect on that, I'm going to give you a little...
Hit me with the 1-2 punch?
Yeah.
The left, right?
Okay, so the first thing you said is what I would really like to focus on in 2025 is not expansion of role, but being able to work on projects that I feel like I can add a lot of value to that are really exciting. The thing with my role is that it's very broad, and so I can work on a lot of different things. I need to get clear about what I need to get clear about is specifically what I want to work on, and that is what I have been doing in preparation for 2025.
Nice. I think I did a great job of that.
Yeah.
I think, in my role in particular, I think because we're a company, we're doing a lot of different things. There is a lot of directions it can go. I think this year I was quite good at just being like, I kind of know my lane. My lane is broad, but it's still a lane. It's still got the little white dashes in the street. Sure. I'm not trying to merge. There's a lot of traffic over there. Right. So I stayed in my lane, and I think I did a pretty good job of that, of not getting distracted by like the next big shiny thing that I could like try to glom onto, and just like really excel at the projects that I scoped out at the beginning of the year that came up and were appropriate to me in my lane. So I'm going to give myself a 8.5 out of 10 on that.
That's amazing. We love to hear that. And then the other thing you said is that it's not important for me to get promoted, and I think I'm fairly compensated. I don't need more money.
Damn it. I said that on record?
You said that's going to be used against me in the court of law for sure.
Damn it. All right. Well, actually, that's incorrect. I should get, no. I'll be very honest. Again, this could be used against me in the court of law. I don't think I need a promotion. Like, I don't know where you go from chief of staff. Like, senior chief of staff seems like even weirder to me.
Yeah.
So I'm not actively seeking a promotion. Obviously, I'll take more money. That's great. Yeah. But I do feel like I'm fairly compensated. I should not be saying this on a permanent record. So I do feel confident about that. And like, I just have a sense where I like to be, I guess, honest with my employer to the degree that you can. And like, if I felt like I wasn't, like, I would want to say that and have it be taken seriously. Yeah. And so when I feel like I am being treated fairly, I don't want to try to get more out of it because like if I do get in a situation where I don't, it's gonna be like, is this like the boy who cried wolf type situation? So yeah, totally should not be saying this, but I do still feel like I'm compensated fairly.
Great. Yeah. Love that. Okay. So just to recap, there's 4 steps to this framework. The first is vibe check. Second is receipt collection, evidence collection. Third is pattern identification based on those receipts, where you're looking at leverage points, bottlenecks, and energy boosts and drains. And the last is compare your achievements versus your original goals. Now, there's actually a fifth step.
There is a fifth step, a hidden step.
A hidden step that we're not talking about because we are at time.
Yes.
We could talk about this for hours, but we are going to be talking about it in 2 weeks.
Yes.
So this is, you want to tell us?
It's about setting your 2026 goals. So what I want you to do after listening to this episode, run through this framework, reflect on 2025, get yourself primed to then set 2026 goals. And we'll talk about how to set and achieve your 2026 goals again in a couple weeks, as Kayla mentioned. So be sure to tune into that episode.
Yeah, and have happy holidays, relax, enjoy yourself, do some reflection, and get ready to kind of lock in 2026.
So the great lock-in will be back. If you have a different reflection framework, would love to hear it. Or if you do ours, please let us know how it goes. Per my last email at morningbrew.com. And while you're there, open up Spotify, open up Apple Podcasts. You see those 5 stars? Click 5. You might win money.
No, you won't. You absolutely will not win money. We cannot say that.
Not from us.
But like karmically,
all right, that's true. You're not going to win money. I overstated what might happen, but you will make us feel good, which produces great karma. Which
more people will see the show because we're rated higher. It's great.
Yes, exactly. So it would make us feel great. It would be a nice holiday gift for us.
Nice end of year something or other.
And it helps other people discover the show. Okay, I've ranted too long on that. Let's roll the credits.
Let's do it.
Our producer is Michaela Heck.
Our technical director is Lonnie Fiskus.
And our president is Devin Emery.
This show is a production of Morning Brew.
Happy reflecting, everyone.